Warren Buffett's Berkshire Hathaway saw its cash pile soar to a record $381.7 billion in the third quarter. Meanwhile, its operating earnings surged by 34% year over year. The big focus for investors, though, remains Warren Buffett's succession and the lack of share buybacks. Joining us to break it all down, Cathy Seifert of CFRA. Cathy, it's good to see you. Let's talk first of all about the quarter, and then we can get to sort of the bigger picture questions, if you will. It seems like insurance numbers boosted earnings overall in the quarter, Cathy, and that seems to be sort of I guess, just a quirk of the hurricane season that had been mild so far.
Right. I mean, the third quarter of this year kind of set a record. It was the first time in over a decade that a named hurricane did not land on U.S. shores. And the absence of significant catastrophes boosted Berkshire's results as well as those of other insurers. So, when you look at these quarterly numbers, they look really good, and the stock is indicated to open higher. A lot of them are sort of one-off events, not necessarily sustainable trends.
And it's speaking of one-off events, I guess, as well, is the cadence of M&A that Berkshire has been doing. It did some deals earlier in the year and then nothing, right? So what do you think all of this implies?
Well, I mean, you have a company at an inflection point. At the same time, you sort of have a stock market and an economy at an inflection point. They did announce the OxyChem acquisition. That's going to take about a little under $10 billion. I mean, compared to the cash hoard, it's a drop in the bucket. And so I think, there are a couple of things that stood out to me this quarter. Not only not really the lack of M&A activity, but my sense is that once Greg Abel takes the helm, we might have a better sense of the cadence of M&A. At least I think that's what investors are hoping for, a little more clarity, a little more transparency, a little more information. But not only did they not acquire external companies, they haven't bought back any of their own shares this year through the 9 months. And, I think that's kind of a big deal. It sends, in my opinion, a message that they don't think their shares are undervalued. So if they don't think they're undervalued, why should we?
Yeah, exactly. I guess that's sort of the thinking among some investors here, Cathy. But do you think we're going to get anything dramatically different from Greg Abel on these fronts?
That's the big question. And my sense is probably not. But I do think that people are waiting to get a sense of how he'll put his stamp on operations. And I think there's an assumption that he's going to want to bring in, his team. It may not necessarily percolate up to the point where it's commonly seen that he's making these changes. But I think that the sense on most of the people who follow this company is that people are waiting to see how Greg will differ. I don't think anyone thinks it's going to be materially different, but I do think he's likely to put his own stamp on operations, whether or not that's tightening up some of the controls, maybe being a little more transparent, maybe having a more structured acquisition program. We're going to have to wait and see. And I think some of that uncertainty is also weighing on the shares.
Do you think we're going to kind of move sideways then until we get that kind of update from him?
I mean, when you look at the results, so bottom line results really beat consensus. But as I said, it was a lot of kind of one-off things. Heading into next year, you've got an insurance environment that's more competitive. You've got Berkshire year to date this year only grew their top line operating revenues by a fraction, like 0.3%. Investment income, which is a big component of revenues, is likely to not grow as fast next year if Treasury yields decline, as people are expecting them to. So, on the one hand, I think you can say that Buffett is leaving him with a company that's in good shape, albeit as at an inflection point. On the other hand, I think we're heading into 2026 with a number of uncertainties related to the company.
Yeah, it sounds like there are quite a few outstanding questions on that front. Cathy, good to see you. Thank you so much.
My pleasure.